Hi, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together, and today I'm going to make a video about how I'm setting up and quilting out a quilt that I'm working on today for Station Stitchers. Let me show you this quilt. This is a picture of the quilt. I did not make this quilt. This was a donation, and I'm not really sure who did make it. There's a tag for it somewhere, but Station Stitchers asked me to quilt this for them, and there's some information in order to start setting up to custom quilt this that I need to know first. So first, I need to know how many blocks are in my rows. And in this case, there's 5 in each of my rows. And this includes, if you look at this carefully, the rows that are staggered, there's also 5. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, full blocks. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you figure this one is staggered, 5. So there's 5 blocks in each rows. And then I need to know how many rows do I have? And this needs to include your partial rows. So when I count those out, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how you would do them. And you'll have to trust me, there are 13 rows. And again, that accounts for the partial rows at the top and the bottom as well. I need to know that information. The other thing that I need to know are some distances. I need to know how big are my blocks. And so you're going to need to measure from the top of this block. So it's really your height this way, that way. And in my case, I have measured several of them to make sure that they were about all the same size. And whoever made this quilt did a fantastic job because they are spot on at about 7 3/4. That includes the white blocks as well. And so then the next thing I need to know is the the inset distance. In this case, it's going to be half of this block. And what I mean by that is where you see that they're going to fit together because they're staggered, where the pattern that's in this block meets this block right here, the middle of this block or this touching area right here. If this was not a square or some kind of other shape, I would need to know this distance right here in order to set that up. Now, because these are squares, it's half of this distance, which half of 7 3/4 is going to be 3.875. So those are the numbers that I need to have to start setting up the quilt. So let me go ahead and do that. Let's go into now QCT. And I'm going to use Advanced Panto to do this. So I find that in my gold features, go Advanced Panto. It's going to ask you to set up your safe area. And I'm in simulation mode, so I'm just going to flip through it. And so I'm going to start setting up my information down here first. So my total width. So now let me just say one of the things that's going to happen is that I'm not going to measure my actual quilt. Now, normally this is not the case, but because of the way that I'm going to set this up with the staggered rows and how I need to set that up, I need to do the math to do that. I need to first set it up the way it should be rather than how it is. And then when I place the pattern, that's where QCT will do all the math for me and make the small adjustments. So, but when I'm setting this pattern up, I need to do it the way it's supposed to be. So if I go by the actual distance of by the mathematical distance that this quilt needs to be, it needs to be 38 3/4 wide. And then I need to do some funky math. And what I mean by funky math, I'm not going to measure the height of 13 rows because these rows don't go together like that because of that inset when they're staggered and then it's moved up so high. The math is a little bit different for that. So what I need to have is what is one whole pattern. Remember, there are 13 rows, and then half of the distance, that inset distance, inset distance, which is 3.875 of 12 of the rows. So the whole row for one, and then one minus the total row for the rest of them. And that distance ends up being, when you do that math, my total height for the whole quilt then is, this is the mathematical height, not its real height, 54 1/4. So I'm going to enter that in there. Now I want to put in that I need 13 rows. All right. So now I'm ready to start putting in my patterns. And so let me tell you that one of the patterns I designed, and I used a whole bunch of other designs and just all kinds of things to design it. And it's the one that goes in the top, and all the odd rows, starting with the top. And then another pattern that I used was one that I had to modify just slightly to make it so, and this is my caveat, in order to stitch them all together, I needed them to be more like a border in that you have a stop on the left and a start on the left and a stop on the right. And so I made certain that the block that I designed had that so that it could stitch out continuously. And then the block I chose for the paisley blocks, the very printed blocks, that's very simple, was just, I don't even think it was a gold pattern. I think it was just in blocks. And I just I had to modify it slightly so that it had a stop on the left and a start on the right and a stop on the left so that they would sew continuously like a border or like a pantograph does. Both of those things is to sew continuously, you have to have your start on the left and your stop on the right, and they have to be at the same height so that they will join smoothly. And that's what I did to these patterns. So let me go ahead and tell you that when you're in either basic mode or advanced Panto, you have to be the boss. So in order to start filling in the patterns, I have to select the rows and then unselect the rows to make sure the pattern goes where I want it to go. So I'm going to start with all the top rows. And I like to actually use this button an awful lot, all or none. So now I can see that everything is selected, and then I can unselect and be sure that everything is not selected, and then select the rows that I do want. So I'm going to select every other row here. And then I'm going to count them, because if there are 13 rows and this is the top one, there should be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there are. So now I'm going to get the pattern that is for this top row, and that's this one right here. Right here, and this is the block that I designed. There we go. And I want 5 patterns, as you recall. So I'm going to enter 5 into there. Okay, and this is the row that needs to be staggered. So I'm just going to go ahead and stagger it right now. So now I'm going to unselect everything. So that's selecting everything, as you can see. And now I'm going to unselect it. There we go. Now everything's not selected. And now I can select the rows that I do want. So that's the opposite rows right here. There we go. Let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's correct. Now let me get the pattern I'm going to put in there. That's this one right here. And again, I want 5 patterns. There we go. But you see how all these gaps and everything looks kind of funny because the ratio on this is not correct. My width is correct, but my height isn't. And so the secret to doing this is that my pattern height needs to be 7.75. But you can see that my row height is 4.173. So I need to change for all of these blocks. So let me do this. Everything is now selected. Now it's all unselected, but just to be sure everything is selected, this is how I just kind of like to work. Everything is now selected. I'm going to change the pattern height for all the blocks. So it's 7.75. I'm going to say, okay. Now that has filled everything up just the way that I want it to. But the problem is going to be now that where I'm at is that I have a big gap right in here. And it isn't really that I have a gap. What it really is that I need to move this pattern up so that this first row up here is a partial row. In order to do that, I need to change some of the settings right through here. And again, this is not a whole entire advanced Panto class. This is just me showing you how I'm setting up the quilt that I'm working on right now at this very moment. And so what I need to do is change this fit just a little bit. I'm okay with how my ends went together. Everything went in there fine. But this has to do with whether things are going to wrap at the top and how they fit inside of this block. This button right here means whether something is going to wrap or not, which would mean if I started to move this, whatever portion gets moved up would come down to the bobbin. And in this case, I don't want it to do that. I just want it to disappear. So I need to turn the wrapping off. So I'm going to turn that wrap off. But if I try to move this right now, you see I can't. I can only move to the left and the right. So I also need to change this bit. This bit has to do with how your rows fit together. I'm just going to change the button right there. So now this becomes active. It's a whole nother class what all these bits mean, but that's what I need to do to get this to move. So then I want to make sure that I have everything selected. So just to be sure, I like to go none. And now I'm going to go all, everything is selected again. Now I'm just going to move the row up, and I'm hopefully going to be able to get it so that it moves right up to the top right there. So I'm going to do that. My step is on medium. So I'm going to start to move it up. And when I'm close right here, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit right here. I'm going to scroll on up to the top so I can have a better idea. So I really want this to be up at the top. So let me see if I can do medium one more time. I'm going to change my step so it doesn't move quite as much. Maybe small will do it. There we go. I think that's about right. Let me see if I can do tiny. That looks about right to me. But it's going to clip it off at any point. So let me go back to all the way out so I can see my whole quilt again. Here we go. And then I can tell when I don't have any buttons up here that I'm still in Zoom. So I can X out of there. There we go. And once I have all these buttons back at the top, then I know that I am back in the regular screen. So I want to count my rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And that's correct. That's how many rows I have. And I'm going to tell you that what is really supposed to happen is that this bottom row right here is supposed to be a partial row. But because I'm going to do this as a pantograph, I'm going to be able to use the partial row feature and clip this at the end, and I'll be happy with that. But what this is allowing me to do is instead of not having to place every single one of these blocks, and I didn't want to have to do that. I wanted to custom quilt this without having to place every single block. And that's what this is going to allow me to do. Now, it may not be perfect for every single block, but it is going to sew out continuously. So sometimes you have to make choices for speed and what time you can give to each quilt. And this is what I'm able to do to get the look that I kind of want in the time that I have to do it in. So I'm going to make sure that I save this first of all. So let's go ahead and save this pattern, save right here. This will allow me also, I wouldn't want to be standing at my machine doing all of this setup. This allows me to then pull it into, save it now, and then pull it into the quilt when I'm at the machine. I'll put it on a USB stick and then just open it up from the USB stick. So let's go ahead and save it. We'll call it On Point Charity. It'll say it's already there, but we're going to rewrite it. That's really truly there. And the other thing that I'm going to do, and although I do believe that by default this is already on, I want to make sure that I check this button right here, sew through clipped, so that when every place that I have moved or shifted the pattern, QCT is going to sew through it so that it remains continuous. And I do want it to do that. I don't have time for all those jump stitches. If you didn't want it to do that, that's how you would get it so you don't have the line at the top. But I'm going to be okay, particularly because the border that this is sitting in that border is very, very busy. And so long as I make sure it's kind of all the way up the line and not below where the seam line is, it really isn't going to show because the border is beautiful, beautiful fabric, but it's very printed. So you're really not going to see it that does go into the border. So it's a good quilt to be able to do something like this on. So once I've got everything ready to go, I can then say sew in zones. And I am going to want to save this when I'm not in simulation mode, but I'm not going to save it because I am in simulation mode and I am not at my machine. In fact, you can hear it's actually already stitching out right now. So now one of the things that I'm going to do is, even though this is a pantograph, and I am in 4-point placement, I always use 4-point placement, I am going to place corners A, B, C, and D. So let me go back to the picture of the quilt. Here's the quilt. And so I'm going to change the setting where I can place A, B, C, and D. But usually you, in a pantograph, you would leave your lock height button checked so that this distance up and down wouldn't shift at all. But in my case, because I am really working truly with blocks, I don't want to have that check. I do want to be able to control the height a little bit, because what that's going to allow me to do is, so this very first zone, it has this block, this one, and this one. So these are the ones that are going to stitch out. And so in order to place and make sure that these truly get inside of the inside of the zone or inside the blocks, do want to place the corners. I can draw a line right here into this triangle right here and through this one right here, so that I can place and make sure that these are going to be better placed and will better sit inside of those blocks. Then I will use the marking tool to see if I've done a good job of doing that. Now, I'm not expecting a real problem in this quilt, because honestly, whoever made this quilt did such a good job that I'm not expecting, they're not going to fit perfectly the way that I'm doing it, but I'm expecting that I will be able to do more than one row at a time. You know, but you would always have the option of with these blocks, you can place all these blocks at the same time and select and sew, or you could place maybe just 2 rows at a time by only setting up 2 rows, and then you could just place 2 rows at a time. And that might give you, again, a custom look without, like maybe without 3 rows. So I think even though there are 4 rows in this particular zone, because this is a half row, most of the quilt will be just three rows at a time, this one, and this one. I think that's how it's going to stitch out. But if I wanted to narrow that down so it was only 2 or only 1, I could always do that too. If I was only do one row, I'd probably do it in select and sew. That would be a lot faster. But at any rate, I'm doing it this way, and I am going to uncheck the lock height so that I can place my corners right here and then use the marking tool to see how well they sit inside that corner. I got a little off track there, sorry about that. But that's what I'm going to do. So when I place this, it's going to be right here, right there, and then right here, and I'll draw another line right there. And that's how I'm going to plan to place this quilt. And so when I do that, it's going to look more like this. I'll place A, and because I'm right at the corners, I won't need to mark anything. That corner is not going to move. And then I'm going to place B. And then this is the button that I'm talking about right here, the lock height. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't want my height to be locked. Then wherever I have that mark, I'm going to place it. So let's just say it's a little bit shorter or a little bit longer. That's what I'm talking about. I have now a little bit of control of that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say maybe that's D and this is C. I'm going to place those. But then what that's also going to allow me to do is I can go into plugins and I can use fabric compensation. So I can go right up to each one of these points or even along the line or the seam lines even to make sure that everything is going to stay in the area that I want it to stay into. So let's say okay with that. And we're just going to say pull bobbin. I always simulate everything so that nothing unexpected happens. So I'll say okay, and you just sew. So it's going to sew out, and then it's going to show me where to do my marking. But honestly, I don't really need to do the marking because I know where the marks need to be. The top of the first row needs to be right here. You can see where this is. And that is a seam line in these blocks. So I'm going to know that that's where it needs to be marked. I will do the mark zone just to make sure it's going to be where I expect it to be, and it is. Next mark. So when I roll this quilt, even though I probably won't even put these marks because the blocks need to be placed where the seam line is. So say continue. Yes, we'll just move it anyway. I will roll this quilt up, and where I'm going to place it is going to be again. So there it is. It is going to be 3 rows, just as I expected. And I'm going to be placing them. I will know where my 4 corners are. And then I will use fabric compensation to make sure that I kind of get a little extra in there to make sure they're really fitting in there. And I can use my marking tool also to be sure that they're fitting in there the way that I want. When I get to the very last row, let's go to Zone Manager. Say yes. When I get to the last row, which will be this one, let's say okay. I'm going to then use the partial row to cut that off. Let's pretend like I'm going to place it. There we go. And my seam line will be like right here somewhere. So what I will want to do is bring my sewing machine to one of those spaces, or it doesn't really matter. It will make a straight line. And then I'm going to push this button right here. It's going to cut it off. Now, it says I'm out of zone, but I'm not. This is the only time where it's perfectly okay to see pink, right? Just like that. And if I wanted to, I could still use fabric compensation. I may use it, I may not. We'll just have to see. But that's how I plan to quilt out this quilt. And I hope this helps you in some way. And I will be posting as I go on this particular quilt. I did already sew out a very simple embroidered corner using gold borders and corners for this quilt. And it is stitching out the first section right now, and it's doing beautifully. In fact, you'll see that I did the marking tool and it fit in there really beautifully. So I'm really happy with how that worked. I hope, again, this helps you. If you have any questions, you can find me on Facebook and private message me, or you can call me, Kathy at Stitch It Together, 540-840-2884. Happy quilting. So first I want to show you that I did place the pattern and how I placed it. So when I placed the pantograph, I used the 4-point method, and I did place A, B, C, and D. And this is how I did that. So A was right up here. And then I drew a line because I knew that the placement was going to be right there. I used this point to help guide that. So that was actually point C. And then B is over here. This was my B corner. And again, I placed a mark right there. So I knew that was the C. And as you can see, this stitched out really well. You can see everything really fit in just like I was expecting it to fit in. I want to show you my screen because I did use the marking tool. And you can see that when I used the marking tool, whoever made this quilt, they did such a beautiful job that these blocks just fit in there with no problem, and my math was correct. I was very happy with this. I didn't need to make any further adjustments. If I had wanted to use any kind of fabric compensation, I could have done that, but I didn't even need to use fabric compensation. So I've been very happy with this. This has allowed me to do custom quilting as if it was a pantograph, and it's going to save me a lot of time. And I'm very happy with these results. So if you haven't seen the video, look for it. Happy quilting, everybody. Thanks for watching.